Today we're speaking with graduate Dana Perea. She earned her paralegal certificate with Ashworth, and then she continued on to her master's degree. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, as many of you know, we recently reached out to some of our graduates and for our Graduate of the Year contest, and I am very happy to announce that, Dana, you are one of our finalists. Congratulations.
Yay. Thank you.
How do you feel?
Amazing, actually. It's such an honor.
Oh, that's so great. Well, we're honored to have received your submission. It was so great, especially as a writer. Like, I was so impressed with how detailed it was and what like a beautiful story you painted and what a clear picture you put out, especially about like the special teachers that you had growing up. I think a lot of us can kind of relate to that. I think hopefully we've all had some, educator in our lives that inspired us and really, pushed you to do your best and be your best. And it seems like you had that. And that's a really special thing. And my parents were both educators, so I have a special appreciation for that. So, thank you for giving that shout out to your teacher as well. That was really, really nice.
Thank you. I was very lucky.
So in your submission, you talked about experiencing mock trial in high school and falling in love with the law. How did you find Ashworth, and what made you decide Ashworth was the school with which you wanted to enroll?
So I had 2 children already, and I wanted a career change. I had been in banking for a long time, and I just didn't want to keep selling. And I wanted to help people. And I had always had a passion for the law, so I started looking up schools and everything. And it's crazy how expensive it is. And when you have 2 kids, you're a single mom, I mean, it feels completely unattainable. Like the deck is just stacked against you entirely. And
Absolutely.
So in my multiple hours of research, I found Ashworth and I started looking into it, and there was a career certificate for paralegal studies. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I can get my foot in the door. I can actually afford this. I was like, I have the will. This is my way.
Oh, I love that, because that is really true, because you do have to have that will. Like it's
Yes.
great to see those things out there and to know that it's accessible, but you do really have to want it.
Yes.
I am a little bit curious about what the paralegal certificate program was like. I actually my background is in writing, and that's what I started out in, but as you mentioned, life sometimes takes a detour, and I ended up actually working in the legal field for a little bit and did paralegal work. So I personally am particularly curious about, what the coursework was like, how you balanced that.
The coursework was actually really interesting because, you hear in law school and you see the movies where people are in law school where they have the different classes specific to each individual type of law. Well, the paralegal studies course was actually kind of like that, just on a smaller scale. So you got a taste of corporate law and criminal law, family law. You got a taste of everything in it. And then it tied it back to what you do versus what the attorney does. So it was actually very informative, very helpful. And it was a lot of information to take in. But luckily, because Ashworth sent me the textbooks, they were always something I could refer back to even now in my career.
Oh, that's amazing. So I know you mentioned your mom, and in your submission, you noted, your kids come first. Again, that's something I totally relate to. I'm a mom. My daughter, she's number one priority all the time. So how did Ashworth kind of help you navigate, the balance between going back to school, working, and, having a full-time job as a mom as well?
Well, I mean, being a mom is a 24/7 job. It never ends, and working, when you're a single mom, you got to provide. And Ashworth gave me the ability to work when I could, when I needed to, when my kids were asleep, when I was making dinner and things like that. It gave me that freedom to be able to do that, to actually achieve my goal.
That's so nice. And with that, I mean, I totally get it, the long hours and the having to balance and just squeeze things wherever they may fit. sometimes people think online school is just a walk in the park, like, oh, you'll just sign on and do whatever, and then like you're done, which is not actually the truth at all. It does require a lot of discipline. So
Yes.
how did you struggle with that initially, especially, with so many other things going on? Did you have a hard time at first trying to find the right pace for yourself? Or were there any other obstacles that you kind of faced at first, and how did you overcome those?
So my biggest obstacle was trying to actually find the time because my younger daughter was a newborn. And so with breastfeeding and working and my other daughter who was 5 years older and already in school, discipline is definitely key. And I am lucky enough that my mom was very disciplined in her work. So I had that example growing up, thankfully. So I became a very disciplined person. When I have something to do, that's what we're going to do. Um, but it is very difficult trying to find time to not get sleep deprived and things. So timing that out, and I bought every color pen you can imagine so that I could make proper notes, because they say, when you read something and then you write it down, it stays with you better. And
Definitely.
so I made sure to do that and utilize all of the tools and tips that I got from Ashworth to be able to do that and
Yeah,
kind of maximize on my ability and time.
for sure. Did you feel like there were resources there to help you? I think that's another misconception sometimes people have, is that, well, at least in terms of Ashworth, I can't attest to other programs, but sometimes, there's an assumption when you're going into it beforehand that it's like, okay, well, I'm going to school online, so I'm going to school by myself. Did you feel like there were resources there if you needed them to help you out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because there's the tutoring program. So if you need help or you just aren't getting something, there's always someone that you can call and turn to. You can set up an appointment and have kind of a longer session, if you will, to help you kind of grasp the concept or make the connections that you just weren't able to make from the readings and from watching the videos that they sometimes have on the portal. It helps you make that connection better. And those people are always there, and they're very nice and they're very willing to help. I mean, when I was doing paralegal studies, since that was my first venture into, online school, it was extremely, extremely useful.
That's so good. Because again, like I said, sometimes people don't know that they're there, or they feel a little bit awkward about using them, but it really is such an important part. If you were in an in-person class and you needed help, you would ask the teacher, ask the instructor. And so, the same thing is there, even though you're not necessarily face to face.
Exactly. And in the remote world that we live in now, we can kind of make that connection of how you can still do the same type of work, even if you're remote, like how we are now with the video chat, right?
Yep. So you started working in the legal field, was it, yeah, after finishing your paralegal certificate. So, it's not always required, at least in some states, to have any sort of degree or background in paralegal studies to work in the field. But do you feel like your Ashworth education, the certificate, helped give you a boost in terms of maybe competing with other candidates for positions?
Yes, it definitely did, actually. Um, I am in Colorado, and in Colorado, every posting for a paralegal that you can possibly find, especially when I started, it was required. You either had to have a bachelor's degree or a paralegal certificate. If you didn't have that, everyone else that you were competing against did. So if you wanted to even be considered for a job, you had to have that.
And I'm going to assume here, but I'm assuming it also probably helped you as well, even if, say, you didn't need it. Feel like, would you say it's fair to assume that like getting into that role and being there kind of helped you transition into your job duties a little bit more easily?
Absolutely. There are so many ins and outs in the legal field and in different areas of law. Without my studies and what I learned in the paralegal studies certificate program, I never would have been able to get all of that, as well as learning the new job, learning the new system. I mean, it took the anxiety part out of it, of knowing what they were talking about, what the processes were. It gave me all of that background so that I was able to hit the ground running.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you started with that, but then you decided to continue on with your education and go
Yes.
even further. So what prompted you to continue past that point, and what was it about Ashworth that made you decide to come back here specifically?
So, because I had had such an excellent experience with Ashworth in the certificate program, my dream job was always just to be a lawyer. I always wanted that since the mock trial in 11th grade. Um, and I knew that Ashworth had a bachelor's program. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. So I checked out the website, saw that I could actually afford that too, which was awesome since I now had a better job being a paralegal. Now it allowed me to be able to afford to do the bachelor's program as well. And I was like, all right, we're going to go for it. Here we go. And but I had had such a great experience with Ashworth for the certificate program. I mean, I wouldn't have gone anywhere else.
Oh, that's great. So, did you find that there were big differences between doing the certificate program and the bachelor's program? I mean, obviously, it's a lot more coursework, but did you find the structure to be any different, or the instructors, or did you find it was kind of just like a transition into, just the next step of that initial part?
I think that, like you said, the coursework is obviously different because you have electives and so you touch a lot of different areas where in the certificate program for paralegal studies, it was very pointed onto just what I was studying, where in the bachelor's program, it allowed me to touch on so many different things. Um, I took a cognitive psychology class that still stays in my mind. I have one assignment from that class that is just so memorable to me.
I
And I
love
never would have
that
thought of taking
happens
that.
so much. Oh, sorry. I just love that happens so much. Like, very often you have a particular class or an assignment that just kind of like really just stands out in your
Yes.
mind like forever.
Oh, it absolutely does. And it was so much fun to do. So there were a lot of different areas that I got to touch on that surprisingly helped me in my career.
What were some of those? Can you give like an example? Because I think
Yeah.
sometimes people think like, okay, it's just the coursework specific to, whatever job you want to do. But sometimes there are those like ancillary classes
Hmm.
or courses or assignments that really you end up applying later on that you maybe didn't expect.
Yes. The biggest one was my cognitive psychology class. I did a paper on the hippocampus in relation to amnesia. And the correlation between the two was astounding. And it just made me want to learn more about why the brain has that effect. What else does it affect? Does it affect the moods, the things that people do? And because it kind of sparked that in me, I have been able to utilize that because when I worked in criminal law, it actually helped me understand exactly what was going on, how the victims responded, all of those things, and what was going on to be a better use, actually.
That's so cool. I think that that's such like an important part of it. And I know we've talked about it in our blogs how, okay, maybe these classes don't seem like they apply to you, but or what you want to do, but it is a really key element, I think, specifically with law, in
Absolutely.
that you need to understand people's motivations, why they do what they do, or how they, like you said, respond to certain things. And that's just such a key important, I think that's really important in society in general, but
It is.
especially with that particular field. Do you think that how did the paralegal certificate help you once you then moved on to your bachelor's? Did you feel like there was some overlap in the coursework that helped, set you up and prepare you for some of the things you were doing in the bachelor's?
I don't believe that there was overlap. It actually continued on. It gave it more substance, more content, and kind of dug deeper into those things that I learned in paralegal studies because that's more pointed to the actual paralegal role. Where in my bachelor's degree for criminal justice, it actually just dove much deeper into actual criminal procedure, civil procedure. Like I said, the psychological part of it, so it just amplified everything.
Great. So you also mentioned having, when you were younger, having aspirations of being this person, like earlier mentioned, always loved the law. You always wanted to do something to help people, but you also felt like it wasn't going to happen for you. And now it's within your reach. You're already part of the way through it. How much of a role do you feel like Ashworth had in getting you to where you are now? And, how will it impact you in the next stage?
In all honesty, I would absolutely not be where I am without it. Without Ashworth, I would not be here. And I can definitively say that because, kids are expensive, life is expensive, things happen that you don't expect. And without being able to do my studies with Ashworth and pay the way that I did, have the resources that I did to be able to help me if I didn't understand something, I would not be here. I would not have this career. I would not have this life.
You also mentioned at the time of your submission that you're preparing for the LSAT. Did you take it yet, or are you still in preparation?
I take it in October, actually.
Oh, that's exciting.
It
I imagine
is
that's a lot of studying to do.
Whole new way of thinking for the LSAT. I will say that. I have friends that are in law school because I've worked so much in the legal field now. I know a lot of paralegals that have continued on to become lawyers. And every single one says being a paralegal first is the best thing you could do for law school because it helps with the studying. When your professors are asking a question, you're like, oh, I know that. I've done that. So
that really gives you a lot of like hands-on experience that maybe if it's somebody who's just, transitioning from like one level of education to the next without that experience, you don't really necessarily have the real world application.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's been everything to help me get to the LSAT to then go on to law school.
Well, in addition to your education, it seems like you're extremely well prepared because, like I mentioned, your submission was so well written, and that's such an important skill for lawyers to have.
Yes.
There's a lot of brief writing. There's just a lot of writing in general. And I have to say, those of us who, were going through the submissions, we're all blown away because we're like, wow, we can really see, like, we're all envisioning, like, we have a picture in our head of the classroom, of the mock trial going on. And then I think some of us even went like a step further. We're like, yeah, I remember, I had an instance like that. And then it just repainted that picture for us.
That's awesome.
Well. So, I think definitely you are well set up for that in addition to, your educational background. Do you know what type of law you'd like to practice and why?
I do. I want to go into family law.
Excellent.
Because of my experience with court systems and victims and children that have been in the system and things like that, and with what I learned in my cognitive psychology class and all of that, I would really like to go into family law and kind of specialize in something called coercive control and what cluster B personality disorders, what effect that has on children that have parents with those disorders. And educate judges, educate other attorneys, because so many people have a misconception of it or just don't know. And without having the credentials and the expertise, then I can't do that. So this has given me the pathway to be able to do that and really, really help kids and families and be the advocate that I've always wanted to be.
That's so nice to see like this dream realized, especially knowing that initially you didn't think it was going to be. I mean, that's part of it, obviously. I'm sure that was terrible in the moment, but I have to imagine that makes it even more satisfying now in a way that,
Absolutely.
it's happening, and to know that you worked so hard. I'm sure you're proud of yourself. I'm sure your kids will be extremely proud of you. We're very proud of you.
Thank you.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's considering Ashworth, especially maybe somebody who's in a similar position to you where, they maybe had hopes, dreams, aspirations, and they just don't feel like they are attainable?
Because Ashworth exists, all you need is the will. And if it sounds a little scary, then it's probably worth it and you're probably on the right path.
I love that so much because I forget what the quote is or who said it, but it's something to the effect of, if it's easy, it's not worth it, or
Mm-hmm.
something to that effect. I'm definitely butchering that. I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do think that it's, like I said earlier, it becomes more satisfying when, not that you want to struggle or you want to see your loved ones struggle, but there is something that's particularly satisfying when, you do kind of have to overcome something.
Yeah,
Know that you worked really, really hard and you really legitimately earned something through like
for
your
sure.
own sheer will and hard work and dedication. And you are clearly the prime example of that. So,
Thank you.
congratulations on being a finalist. Congratulations on your education. Congratulations on, on getting ready for your LSAT, and good luck.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add for anybody out there?
One thing I'd like to add is a thank you to my professors, to Ashworth for giving me the ability to actually become what I've always wanted to become. Because without it, I don't know where I'd be. I don't want to think about where I'd be because I am so grateful to be where I am. And that's because I went to Ashworth. So thank you to all of you.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with all of us. You are definitely an inspiration. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are going to listen and watch this and feel like they can reach their goals too. And a lot of
I
that
hope
is
so.
in thanks to you sharing.
Thank you so much for your time, Nicole.